What if the coin sitting in your hand right now, the one you were told was a smart investment, actually cost you 30% more than it should have, and you had no idea because nobody ever showed you how to check? That single gap in knowledge is exactly how ordinary buyers, people trying to protect their savings, end up quietly losing money to sellers who know the numbers far better than they do. Today, we are going to close that gap. We are going to walk through the exact signs that separate a fair, transparent bullion transaction from one designed to squeeze extra profit out of a buyer who never learned what to look for. By the end of this video, you will be able to look at any quote, any invoice, any glossy sales pitch, and know within minutes whether the price in front of you reflects honest market value or something else entirely. Before we go further, a quick note. Nothing in this video is financial advice. We are simply breaking down how pricing works in the precious metals trade so you can make informed decisions with your own money. Now let's get into it. The first thing every buyer needs to understand is the difference between spot price and retail price. Spot price is the benchmark figure you see quoted on financial news. The theoretical value of 1 troy ounce of raw, unfabricated metal at this exact moment in the global market. It moves constantly, shifting with currency swings, interest rate expectations, geopolitical tension, and shifts in industrial or investment demand. Gold has spent recent months trading in a range near $4,000 an ounce, a level that would have seemed almost unimaginable only a few years earlier. Silver moves alongside it, though with far sharper daily swings because its market is smaller and more sensitive to shifts in sentiment. Retail price, on the other hand, is what you actually pay when you walk into a shop or click checkout online. It always sits above spot, and that gap has a name: the premium. A premium is not automatically a red flag. It covers real costs. Mining, refining, minting, shipping, insurance, storage, and the seller's own margin all have to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is the premium layered on top of spot. The question is never whether a premium exists. The question is whether that premium is reasonable for the product you are buying, or whether it has quietly ballooned into something that benefits the seller far more than it benefits you. This is where most overcharging hides. Not in some dramatic scam, but in a premium that has crept up past what the market actually supports. So how do you know what a reasonable premium looks like? Start with the product category, because different forms of metal carry different baseline costs. Widely produced, government-minted bullion coins from major sovereign mints tend to carry the smallest premiums because they are produced in enormous volume and are instantly recognizable and liquid anywhere in the world. Generic rounds and bars produced by private refiners usually sit slightly below that, since there is no sovereign backing or legal tender status attached. Then there are so-called collectible or numismatic pieces, limited mintage coins, commemorative issues, graded and slabbed items claimed to carry extra value beyond their metal content. These can carry premiums many times higher than the underlying metal is worth. And this is precisely the category where the greatest overcharging tends to occur, because the seller is asking you to trust a subjective claim about rarity or future collector demand rather than a transparent, verifiable market price. If a seller is steering you hard toward numismatic or limited edition pieces while brushing past standard bullion, treat that as your first warning sign. Ask yourself why the conversation keeps drifting toward the product with the least price transparency and the highest markup potential. Now let's talk about the actual math, because you do not need to be a professional trader to run this check yourself. Pull up the live spot price for gold or silver at the moment of your quote. Multiply that by the weight of the item in troy ounces. That gives you the raw metal value. Then compare that number to the price you are being asked to pay. The difference, expressed as a percentage, is your premium for common, widely circulated bullion coins from major mints. Premiums in a normal, competitive market typically land somewhere in the range of a few percent to around 8 or 9% over spot, depending on size, current demand, and minting costs. Smaller coins generally carry higher percentage premiums than larger bars simply because the fixed costs of manufacturing get spread across less metal. Silver, because its price per ounce is so much lower than gold, often shows a higher percentage premium even when the actual dollar markup is modest. So don't panic purely because a percentage on silver looks large. Always sanity check the dollar amount too, not just the percentage. If your calculation shows a premium climbing into the 20, 30, or 40% range on a standard bullion product, something is off and you deserve a clear explanation before handing over any money. There are moments, particularly during periods of extreme demand or supply disruption, where premiums genuinely spike across the entire industry. That has happened before, and it can happen again. The key difference is that during a true industry-wide premium spike, you will see the elevated pricing reflected consistently across many different dealers, not isolated to one shop quietly charging more than everyone else. Which brings us to the single most powerful tool in your arsenal: comparison shopping. Overcharging thrives in isolation. It survives because buyers walk into one store, hear one number, and assume that number reflects the whole market. The moment you gather 3, 4, 5 quotes for the exact same product, weight, and purity from different sellers, the outliers reveal themselves immediately. If 4 sellers quote you within a tight band of each other and one quotes you dramatically higher, you now have concrete evidence, not a vague suspicion. Do this comparison before you buy, not after. Once metal is in your hand and the transaction is closed, your leverage disappears. Spend the extra 20 minutes checking multiple sources first. It is quite possibly the highest hourly wage you will ever earn. Let's talk about another area where overcharging often hides: the buyback spread. This is the gap between what a dealer will sell you an item for today and what that same dealer will pay you to buy it back tomorrow. Every legitimate dealer has some spread because they need room to operate and profit on both sides of a transaction. But a healthy, competitive spread should be modest. If you ask a seller directly what they would pay to repurchase the exact item they are trying to sell you right now, and the buyback number comes in shockingly low compared to the sale price, that spread is telling you everything you need to know about how much room for markup exists in that sale price. This single question, "What would you pay me to sell this back to you today?" is one of the most revealing things you can ask any dealer. A confident, transparent seller will answer without hesitation. A seller inflating prices will often deflect, change the subject, or quote you a buyback figure that exposes just how wide that spread really is. Now let's address emotional pressure tactics, because these show up constantly in this industry and they are almost always paired with inflated pricing. Watch for urgency language. Phrases suggesting a price is only available for the next few minutes. That supply is about to run out, that a market crash or currency collapse is imminent, and you need to act immediately. Genuine market movements do happen, but legitimate businesses do not need to manufacture panic to sell a fairly priced product. If you feel rushed, that pressure itself is information. Slow down. A fair price today will still be roughly fair tomorrow, because spot price does not move so violently in 24 hours that a brief pause costs you meaningfully. Also be alert to fear-based marketing that leans heavily on economic collapse narratives, currency destruction, or government confiscation scenarios to push you toward buying quickly and in large quantities, often steering you toward the highest margin products in their inventory. Healthy skepticism protects you. A seller's job is to sell. Your job is to verify. Let's talk about fees that hide outside the headline price. Some sellers advertise an attractive per ounce number and then attach additional charges once you reach checkout. Shipping costs that seem disproportionate to the actual weight being shipped. Insurance charges layered on top of shipping insurance you didn't ask for. Credit card surcharges that appear only after you have already committed mentally to the purchase. Storage fees for items you thought you were taking physical possession of. None of these fees are automatically improper, but they need to be disclosed up front, clearly, before you commit. When you calculate your true premium, always calculate it using the final all-in price you actually pay, not the attractive headline number used to draw you in. This is one of the most common ways an otherwise reasonable-looking premium quietly transforms into an unreasonable one by the time the transaction closes. Let's talk about purity and weight verification, because overcharging sometimes isn't about the price at all. It's about what you are actually receiving for that price. Reputable bullion carries clear purity markings and recognized hallmarks from established mints and refiners. If you are purchasing anything that lacks clear certification, or if a seller is vague about exact purity and weight when asked directly, that vagueness itself is a warning sign. You cannot properly judge whether a premium is fair if you cannot confirm the actual metal content you are receiving. Ask for documentation. Ask for assay certificates on larger purchases. A seller unwilling to provide basic verification of what you are buying should immediately lose your business, regardless of how attractive the headline price looks. Now, let's turn to a subtler form of overcharging that catches many buyers off guard. The framing of gold or silver as a guaranteed path to extraordinary returns. Precious metals can play a legitimate role in a diversified approach to protecting wealth, but any seller promising guaranteed appreciation, guaranteed protection from every possible economic scenario, or portraying their specific product as uniquely positioned to multiply in value, is using sales narrative to justify a premium that the underlying metal itself does not support. The metal is the product. The story wrapped around it should never be the primary reason you are paying more. Let's also discuss how location and format affect fair pricing, because context matters enormously here. Buying in person from a local shop often carries a different cost structure than buying online from a large national dealer, and neither is automatically better or worse. Local shops may have higher overhead per transaction, but offer immediate physical possession and a relationship you can return to. Large online dealers often benefit from volume pricing and can pass some of that efficiency along, though shipping and insurance become part of the equation. What matters is comparing like against like. Don't compare a small local shop's price on a rare, low mintage item against a massive online retailer's price on a common high-volume coin and conclude one is overcharging simply because the numbers differ. Match the product type, weight, and purity precisely before drawing any conclusion about fairness. Let's talk about a practical, step-by-step approach you can use the very next time you consider a purchase. First, check the live spot price at that moment, not a number from yesterday or last week, because metal markets move constantly, and even a modest shift can distort your math if you're working from stale figures. Second, identify the exact weight and purity of the product being offered. Third, calculate the raw metal value using that live spot price. Fourth, compare the quoted price against that raw value to find your premium percentage. Fifth, gather at least 3 additional quotes for the identical product from different sellers. Sixth, ask directly about the buyback price for that same item. Seventh, read the fine print for hidden shipping, insurance, or payment processing fees. Eighth, confirm purity documentation and certification. Only after completing these steps should you feel confident that the number in front of you reflects genuine market value rather than an inflated figure designed to extract more from you than the transaction warrants. It's worth mentioning that overcharging isn't always deliberate deception. Sometimes it reflects a smaller operation with genuinely higher costs, thin trading volume, or a niche specialty that commands a legitimate premium for reasons that have nothing to do with taking advantage of buyers. The goal here isn't to assume bad faith in every transaction. The goal is to arm yourself with enough understanding that you can distinguish a premium built on real costs from one built on exploiting a buyer's lack of information. Once you can make that distinction confidently, you hold the power in every negotiation, because you are no longer relying on a seller's word alone. You are relying on verifiable numbers you calculated yourself. Let's also touch briefly on secondary market sales, because many buyers eventually decide to sell metal they already own, and the same principles apply in reverse. If you are selling, the same spot price calculation tells you what a fair offer should look like. A buyer offering you dramatically less than spot value, citing vague reasons about market conditions or refining costs that don't match reality, deserves the same scrutiny you'd apply when buying. Fair dealing runs in both directions, and the tools you've learned today protect you whether you are the one purchasing or the one liquidating. One more thing worth addressing directly: reputation research. Before committing to any significant purchase, especially from an unfamiliar seller, take time to look into their standing. Check for consistent patterns of complaints regarding pricing, transparency, delayed shipments, or products not matching what was advertised. A single negative review means little in isolation, but a persistent pattern across many independent sources tells a clearer story. Established sellers with long operating histories and transparent pricing structures generally earn that reputation over years of consistent, fair dealing, and that history is worth factoring into your decision alongside the raw numbers. To bring this all together, protecting yourself from being overcharged when buying gold or silver comes down to a handful of core habits. Know the live spot price before every conversation about buying. Understand that a premium is normal, but must stay within a reasonable range tied to the specific product category. Calculate that premium yourself rather than trusting a seller's characterization of it. Compare multiple quotes before committing to anything. Ask pointed questions about buyback pricing to reveal the true spread. Watch for urgency and fear-based pressure as signals to slow down rather than speed up. Read every fee before the final total, not after. Confirm purity and certification on anything you're not already familiar with. And take reputation seriously as a supplementary signal alongside the math. None of this requires specialized training or industry insider status. It requires patience, a calculator, and a willingness to ask direct questions even when a seller seems friendly, confident, or urgent. The buyers who get overcharged are rarely careless people. They are simply people who trusted a number without checking it against the market themselves. You now have every tool needed to never be that buyer again. If you found this breakdown useful, consider sharing it with anyone you know who is thinking about adding physical gold or silver to their holdings, because informed buyers are precisely what keeps this market honest for everyone. Stay sharp, verify everything, and we'll see you in the next one.